Makerfield by-election has become an all-out war between Reform UK and Restore Britain, and things are getting brutal. So I thought we'd cover the full campaign so far, the respective candidates, Rebecca Shepherd, Robert Kenyon, as you can see on screen there. Can't play his video because it's got copyrighted music. And then we're going to look at the smears, and the hit pieces, and the polling, and then make some projections as to who's going to win. But so far, the crash out by some people involved has been seismic. It's a proper spectacle. Anyway, Rob Kenyon is Reform UK's candidate for the Makerfield by-election. He ran in 2024 in the general election, got about 32% of the vote, came in second to Labour MP Josh Simons, the former head of Labour Together, who allegedly tried to get GCHQ Special Branch to spy on journalists who were writing negative press about his think tank. Simons stepped down to allow Andy Burnham a clean run at Parliament to become the leader of the Labour Party and therefore our default Prime Minister. Rob Kenyon wants to spoil Burnham's chances, and despite Reform UK running in the local elections on a ticket of get Starmer out, they're now trying to keep Starmer in by stopping Burnham from getting elected and having Rob Kenyon get elected instead. And Kenyon is a very strong candidate. Again, you know, I've been supportive of Restore Britain. I still have some friends and allies working in Reform. They're still patriots despite the decisions of the leadership that I disagree with. And I think Rob is actually one such patriot. He seems like one of our guys. He's a plumber, local lad, used to work in the NHS, army reservist, married, 2 kids, and the greatest hits they can have against him are that he's said some imprudent, not very politically correct things on his social media accounts. And I think Rob Kenyon is an avatar of Reform trying to learn a necessary lesson, which is for the last few years, and this is the reason that Restore Britain even exists, Reform have been disavowing and denouncing and ejecting members of their party and their own support base on the grounds that they've been saying things which will get them called evil, racist, far-right bigots by the BBC, Sky News, ITV, and even some on GB News, their home turf. So what they haven't learned yet is that you don't actually have to do this ritualistic denunciation on behalf of an establishment media that would rather see you capsize or conform to their expectations, and in either event, you fail, and then succeed. You don't have to pander to your enemy's standards of propriety because they've used words like racist to shut down necessary conversations about mass migration and the grooming gang scandal for decades. They are culpable for all the atrocities that have been committed by the men who never needed to be here in our country in the first place, and that you are pitching yourself to the electorate as the people that have the credibility, the courage, and the capacity to stop. This is quite some effective campaigning. I just wanted to make a note. So Farage went out on a candid van trip with Kenyon, and if anything, it shows that Farage is actually the liability in this by-election, because Farage was saying boomer platitudes about how teenagers don't really want to work these days and they're sort of lazy, whereas Kenyon was making the point that all of the opportunities in the area have been desolated. Mass migration has deprive teenagers of entry-level jobs, as has the rise in the minimum wage and the cost imposed upon employers to take on apprentices that makes it just as costly to hire someone who is experienced to work full-time as it is to train someone up, so you don't get people starting in the trades anymore, which you need. And he was going around the town and explaining this is where he was born before the maternity centre was shut down, this is where he worked as a kid, this is where he met his wife in a bar, and the grounds this election is being fought on are: here are 2 local, relatable people who are real people versus the Westminster establishment parachuted candidate that is Andy Burnham, whose slogan is "Vote Andy for us." And by us, he doesn't mean the people of Makerfield or even the people of the country. He means the Labour Party, because he wants to salvage the tainted Labour brand. So both parties, Reform and Restore, are trying to pitch themselves as being the authentic anti-establishment voice that will represent local people. And to be fair to Kenyon, and we're going to separate Kenyon out from the imprudent decisions and rhetoric of the Reform leadership, to be fair to Kenyon, he wears that brand quite well. But after Kenyon announced his candidacy, people did some digging, and they found that his old X account that he used to campaign in 2024 was deleted, and they found some archived or screenshotted posts, and he was quote retweeting Carl Benjamin. He was also quote retweeting Rupert Lowe, Peter Sweden, who I don't know, apparently he's a Swedish anti-migration activist, and Wayne O'Rourke. Wayne O'Rourke was imprisoned as one of the far-right thugs, I'm using air quotes for people that are just listening to the audio, by Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer in the aftermath of the Southport massacre. So it seems that Rob has been percolating in online right discourse for quite some time, and He seems to agree with the things we say. And so, cue the hit pieces from the Metro. Rob Kenyon suggested the king should open up Buckingham Palace for asylum seekers, and what he meant was he should open up royal property to house all of these men coming over on small boats if he likes Islam so much, and if he cares so much about diversity and being the defender of the faiths rather than of Christianity. He was quote retweeting Owen Jones saying, "Be honest, Owen, there was never a threat from the far right because they don't really exist." He was quote retweeting the Home Office saying, "Is it a hate crime for Asian men to walk around in Birmingham assaulting white people en masse?" True. Based. And this was during, again, the Southport protests and riots, when masked, balaclavaed, armed Pakistanis were gathering in various towns and cities across the north, particularly Birmingham, where they occupied a roundabout, intimidated a Sky News journalist, rampaged outside a pub, and lacerated the liver of a pubgoer. And very few faced consequences for this. And he even quote retweeted Rupert Lowe, remarking on the complicity of the police in two-tier policing, giving the Pakistani mobs much lighter touch than the mourning white working class who were protesting against Keir Starmer, mass migration, and the grooming gangs. And he agrees, two-tier policing is rife. So it seems that Kenyon is on board with all of our talking points. He is our guy. While I was recording, Robert Kenyon and Rupert Lowe have gone back and forth on X, because Rupert Lowe relayed a Times report that says that Rob Kenyon didn't vote for Brexit and supported the EU, and therefore is saying he's in favour of open borders and mass migration. I think that's actually unfair from whoever posted that on Rupert's account. And then Kenyon is saying, "I used to respect you, Rupert. Restore have never wanted anything to do with this area, but now someone born with a silver spoon in their mouth is trying to lie about the only working class local man in the race. I want net negative immigration." I'm glad you do, Rob. But again, this attack line isn't very convincing, and this will come up later in this podcast. Restore, since their inception, have wanted something to do with Makerfield, because the only reason they ran a candidate in the by-election is because they had a large constituency branch of like 150 people, and they picked a member of that branch, Rebecca Shepherd, to run as their candidate. So since Restore have existed and set up local branches, they have actually wanted to do something in Makerfield. So this just isn't an effective attack line, I'm afraid. Nevertheless, I've got no problem with Rob Kenyon. He seems like a decent bloke. Media do, though. They're still complaining that he sent out some demeaning posts about women, saying that they can't referee football or rugby matches. True. They can't really drive. Also true, but neither can I. And then he said he also wanted to sniff Carol Vorderman's posterior. Alright, yeah, a bit weird, mate, when they posted that on Main. I can't repeat some of the posts because we're on YouTube and it will get the video flagged. But what I think it's important to bear in mind is where these attacks are coming from. So, all of these posts were unearthed by, of course, Hope Not Hate, who Reform UK previously used to vet their candidates for them. They did it back in 2014. Gawain Towler contacted Dan Hodges, a name that will be coming up again. He is the son of a Labour MP and is also a columnist at the Daily Mail, and it was their point man for contacting Hope Not Hate to run a list of UKIP candidates past to see if they had previous ties with the BNP. And Gawain Towler keeps justifying that. And then, in the 2024 election, when Hope Not Hate wrote various hit pieces on people, including Bo Dade of the Lotus Eaters, watch the Breakfast with Bo show, it's very good in the mornings, they decided to drop those candidates, and Richard Tice went around doing interviews saying they were racist, and they said things that were beyond the pale. And even at the last local elections, some of the candidates were dropped over Hope Not Hate hit pieces. Hope Not Hate have successfully claimed scalps within Reform on their staff. So Reform usually don't stand by their people. And that's not good, because most people use social media as if they were talking to their friends. They don't use it with the mindset that should they want to become a more prominent public figure in future, their words will be held against them forever. Because human beings throughout all of human history have not communicated in this way. We haven't written as if we're speaking candidly, and then these words exist forever as if they're inscribed on stone tablets handed down from heaven, and can be extrapolated out of context, made into a news article, and that you be made to answer for them. Because the entire point of words is that we're able to just get them out, and if we get something wrong, we retract, we apologise, we're allowed to change our minds in future. There is no capacity for forgiveness here with cancel culture, and so people stop caring, because if they know that saying sorry or trying to provide context doesn't stop the cancellation, then the cancellation itself becomes inevitable, and so you don't actually have to play along with it. Because the entire goal is not a good faith exercise in finding out what you meant, or trying to say, hey, this genuinely upset a named person that you should consider a moral authority, and therefore you should probably apologise to them. Instead, it's just trying to use mob mentality to sabotage the prospects of their political opponents. And lying behind every effort of cancel culture, as is here with Hope Not Hate, is one, the communist politics of Hope Not Hate members, like Matthew Collins, member of the Communist Party, who in 2013 praised Stalin's Red Army and compared Hope Not Hate to the Red Army favourably in front of a hammer and sickle. It's Liron Velleman, the paedophile Jewish Labour activist and Labour councillor, who was a member of Hope Not Hate staff, who represented Hope Not Hate in Parliament to help craft the Online Safety Act, who got caught in a police sting sexting what he thought was a 13-year-old girl. And weirdly got a suspended sentence and no jail time for that. I think we should return capital punishment for paedophiles, on a side note. And also, but lying behind this is that Hope Not Hate are doing this because they are a campaigning arm of the Labour Party. They've been sending out letters to Makerfield residents. And remember, they're a registered charity under the name Hope Unlimited. They've rebranded from the Hope Not Hate Trust, charitable trust. They're now sending out letters saying both candidates will say they will change Britain. Reform UK's Rob Kenyon and Andy Burnham. But only one, Andy Burnham, is likely to be able to deliver that immediately. Quite simply, if he wins, he will most likely become Prime Minister. Right, so a registered charity is conducting partisan political campaigning. That should break Charity Commission laws, but they did the same with the Rochdale by-election back in 2024 with George Galloway. They were campaigning against George Galloway in favour of the Labour candidate, and they faced no repercussions. And the reason is, Hope Not Hate is in bed with the intelligence agencies, the Home Office. They're essentially a entity that enjoys the protections of both government funding, friends in high places like their former patron Baroness Ruth Anderson, formerly Smeath, who is now a senior figure in the Cabinet Office. They had privileged access to Downing Street under Morgan McSweeney. Hope Not Hate are the establishment. They destroy the reputation of Labour's political opponents using accusations like far-right and racist. And everyone knows it. And their reprehensible behaviour has destroyed their own credibility, so nobody cares anymore. And neither does Rob Kenyon, because when he was asked, did you tweet foreign criminals are invading our country? He said, am I wrong? Patriot. Correct. And also, Reform have said they won't investigate him for this. Now, people are asking, okay, are Reform learning that Hope Not Hate is not a moral authority? That you don't actually have to care, because most people don't care about this stuff. They care that their high street is full of dodgy foreign vape and phone shops, that random foreigners are just milling about in the middle of the day, making their wives, daughters, sisters and friends feel unsafe, that they are poorer, that their energy bills have hit the roof, and that they don't feel represented by a politician because none of them share their values. Again, your average Labour voter is to the right, socially, of your average Tory politician. So the Westminster bubble has seemed impenetrable for decades. And so they might find a slightly foul-mouthed local plumber, and also ex-army reservist, to be a quite palatable option compared to Andy Burnham and the politics of continuity. A spokesperson for Reform said they fully back Robert Kenyon and added, the comments were made before he was in politics. So we just shouldn't hold jokes or crass rhetoric against your average van man. So when Nigel Farage was asked about this by ITV, he just brushed it off and said, oh, this is all a load of nonsense, I'm actually standing by my candidate. And for once, Farage didn't throw someone under the Brexit bus. So, are they learning? Well, then they let Danny Kruger do an interview. Lock Danny Kruger in a box and let him work on civil service reform, but he is butter soft. He thinks Afghans can self-identify as English, he thinks the entire country should become the Michaela School, he quite likes Islam because they're religious, even though they don't share his religion as an evangelical Christian, and will go out of his way to defend the reputation of Israel, but doesn't think that Britain should be afforded the same sense of national identity and demographic security. I think Danny Kruger's philosophically incoherent, and anytime he is pressed to have a little bit of courage and stand by his man, well, he just said, I'm not going to defend these comments. And tries to deflect and say, well, we've got bigger problems to deal with. So he's already conceded that the comments themselves are objectionable to him, so it's then hard to argue that your candidate should stay in the race because you agree with the grounds on which the hostile media are trying to conduct a digital lynching of him. Could be worse, could be Layla Cunningham, who, at an event with Politics UK, was saying that they need to water down their deportations pitch because she was going door to door and random foreigners would say, oh, Reform is going to deport me, or that Reform's going to deport my mum. And so she thinks that Reform should be the wholesome, chungus, anti-racist Liberal Party that isn't actually going to do anything about immigration. It's like the vegan at a barbecue effect, where If one person shows up and demands a bug burger, well, it's easier for everyone to cook bug burgers, and suddenly you're all drinking soy milk and getting man boobs.
So I went to a basketball court that I used to play basketball in, and I was playing with some kids, and I've kind of got some hoops in. Anyway, at the end, I'm like, guys, you know, you got to vote for me. I'm running for London mayor, and they're like, oh yeah, cool, sure, you know, we'll vote for you, cool. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, so check me out on social media. So they're like, oh yeah, fine. Layla, oh shit, you're running for reform? You're going to deport my mum. And it was that kind of, I'm like, what? No. I'm like, listen, I'm the daughter of immigrants as well, but I have found that at the doorstep. And, you know, and I think obviously a lot of people get their news from social media. And I do find that social media is almost like you're in an algorithm and you're in a lane and you don't deviate. I don't get anything positive on my social media about Sadiq Khan. There must be some out there. And I'm sure that Sadiq Khan doesn't get any positive stuff about me, even though there's a lot out there. So I think people do kind of go into this tunnel vision, and the tunnel vision of some of the algorithms for London is, you know, we are completely anti-immigrants and we're going to deport immigrants and we're racist, you know. And I think I'm quite a good person to dispel that. Yeah. You know,
Lola Cunningham is just Sadiq Khan in drag at this point. She's arguing that she needs to be given a senior position in the party so that she can act as diversity body armour for accusations of racism that will always be lobbed at Reform, whether or not they're full of Muslims and immigrants at the senior level or not. And it's inconsistent statements like Cunningham's and the treatment of Reform's base in the past with derision and denouncing and ejection that has led to Restore Britain even existing. And if you look over at Restore Britain's ground campaign in Makerfield, they're getting hundreds of activists turning out 3 weeks before the election. Rupert Lowe has shared this photo here. Any party would kill to get a crowd this size of canvassers willing to give up their weekend just to put leaflets through doors and act as brand ambassadors for your party. On a character judgment and pure good faith alone. So there is actual momentum with Restore Britain, particularly in Makerfield, which is why they decided to run for the seat. People were asking why they weren't contesting the Scottish Parliament seat in Aberdeen. It's because there isn't a Restore branch there yet, and Restore have committed to only picking candidates who are local to the constituency, and they're using their branch structure to identify those candidates. And Dan Hodges, again, arch enemy of anything patriotic, says, just for fairness, this does reflect what I found in Makerfield when he went there to report. Restore have much more of a presence on the ground than I was anticipating. Have to see if they can sustain it, but it's real. Hodges says, to summarise what I found in Makerfield, it's Reform territory. In any other context, this would be an easy Reform win. The Burnham effect is real. Local people view him as one of their own. We'll see about that. I don't think even if Burnham wins, he'll be able to reverse Labour's fortune. See my last video, I'll link it in the description. But he also says, Restore have more of a presence than I anticipated. This may well be a factor. It could be a 3-horse race, because 3 weeks out from the election, Restore are sending armies of canvassers down to door knock and spread the word. And I think Reform are worried about this. I mean, look at the amount of people that showed up on Saturday in the sweltering heat just to meet one another, hand out leaflets, try to win the by-election for Rupert Lowe. And as you can see, if you compare the crowd sizes, I mean, there are definitely people out canvassing and campaigning for Rob Kenyon. They have their signs, they're knocking on doors. But, just on sheer crowd size alone, Restore Britain have more canvassers. Again, 3 weeks out from the local election. And this has put the fear of God into Reform. Reminder, these people aren't paid. The people that show up to the local branch meetings aren't paid to come along. They're just doing it because they're worried about the country, and, importantly, they don't buy Reform's sales pitch. And that's Reform's fault. It's not Rupert's fault. It's not social media misinformation. It's not Elon Musk. Reform failed to inspire these people, who, many of whom will have been former Reform voters. There's also a very large share, perhaps at this crowd, but certainly at other Restore branches, who have never voted before, have never been members of a political party before, have been totally disillusioned with politics for years until Rupert Lowe came across their X or Facebook feed. So Restore are activating non-voters, and this factor can't be discounted. We've already seen how that was successful in Great Yarmouth with a strong local canvassing campaign, campaigning on local issues with local candidates. They swept. They got all 9 local council seats and the 1 county council seat they were contesting. And they did it with double the vote share of their nearest rival. You could halve Great Yarmouth First, the subsidiary party of Restore Britain that was set up before Restore launched as a party, you could have halved their vote share and still beaten Reform in every seat. That kind of enthusiasm hasn't been matched by any of the other parties yet, including Reform. And whether they admit it or not, it is betrayed by their conduct that they are nervous about this. And they tacitly acknowledge that all of these people should have actually been wearing teal and canvassing for them, and they just alienated them needlessly out of arrogance or not wanting to be called mean names by a media that never wanted to see Reform succeed. One such action includes showing up to the pub where Restore Britain's canvassers convened after the canvassers left in their teal taxi, and Will Coleshill of Vox Populi tried to get an interview with them, and they drove off and made themselves scarce very quickly. Restore Britain are putting everything they have into this by-election. They've bought billboards, they've marshalled their army of canvassers, Rupert Lowe is down there himself, meeting people in local pubs, coordinating the events, and Restore seemed quite optimistic after their first day of polling. Rupert said the following in this clip with Montgomery Toms from the canvassing car.
Right, we're not in the Tesla today, but we're still going around. We're up north. How's it been? What's the reception been like?
Well, I'd say it's almost better than Great Yarmouth, Monty, which takes some beating. I think we walked about 100 yards and we must have been stopped by about 24 people. It's quite incredible. And there's a sort of spirit of the Battle of Britain about it. I really think it's very exciting, and that I've been telling people this is the most significant election probably in 100 years, and the responsibility is on them to vote to take their country back.
Restore have attracted prominent supporters in the by-election as well. Duncan Bannatyne said, "Last week I decided to throw my support behind Andy Burnham for leadership of the Labour Party and on to PM, but I can't do that now that I find out," he says, "trans women, men, should be allowed to use the ladies' toilets. I can never support anyone that does this. Biological women must have single-sex spaces." A very sane and reasonable opinion to hold. And people are asking him, okay, well, who do you support then, Duncan? Are you throwing your weight behind Reform? Because Duncan Bannatyne has previously expressed support for Rupert Lowe after his launch video announcing Restore Britain will become a national political party. He responded, saying, "Oh, I didn't know Rupert was putting up a candidate for the by-election. Give me his or her name and I'll research them. Thank you." And Rupert pointed out that Rebecca Shepherd is a local businesswoman. Her business is a horse riding therapy thing for special educational needs and autistic children. I mean, sweet enough, I suppose. Though, just a word of caution, Send does code as, pardon the pun, taking the taxpayer for a ride. So I would, in your campaign messaging, emphasise local concerns and also highlight your distinctions from the other parties that are pro-mass migration, or at least won't reverse it for fear of being called racist. Rupert said, "We'd love to have your support, Duncan. She's very passionate about small business and rejuvenating our high streets, just what Makerfield needs." And Duncan Bannatyne says she has my support for the by-election now. He did turn down an invite to appear on the Lotus Eaters. Dan took it gracefully, though, and said if he ever changes his mind, the invite remains open. Now, Rebecca Shepherd is a bit of an unknown quantity. She is not nearly as strong a presence in the media or online as Rob Kenyon. I don't think she has her own social media account, actually, and most of her appearances are being filtered through the Restore Britain account. I think that's a bit of a weakness if you'd like to make her more prominent. But I think Restore Britain are speccing heavily into the local ground game because they think that actually the only votes that matter are those of the people that live in the constituency, and if they see that she is a local woman representing local concerns, then they will succeed. I have my reservations about Rebecca, being candid with you. I haven't seen enough of her to form that strong an opinion. I've seen an interview with her with Vox Populi, and she didn't seem well acquainted with the policy documents of Restore. Her answers seem short. She seems like she needs more media training. I suggested this to the party. She spoke about general concerns about feeling like second-class citizens in our own country, wanting to take care of our people first. She actually gave a speech with Rupert Lowe at an event that said exactly this. Aren't you concerned that you're sleeping in one bed with all your children while men from overseas get given accommodation at your expense? It's not that we don't want to help the needy, but we should take care of our people first. I mean, being frank, I'm well beyond extending compassion and resources to people that profess that they are in need, because our kindness has been taken as weakness, it's being exploited. And sorry, Britain is so far away from all of the war zones that people claim to be refugees from. They can seek asylum in the nearest, safest country to them, and that is not Britain, because we're surrounded by a literal moat called the English Channel and the Irish Sea. So I actually don't have much compassion for people that profess their neediness. I'm with Rupert now. I don't care. When Rupert was on stage with her at a Makerfield event, he pointed out that Emily Maitlis said that he was racist because he said he would detain illegal migrants on a windswept Scottish island, give them a cup of cold porridge, a thin tent, and let the midges do the rest. And you can see Rebecca there pulling faces and shaking her head when Rupert said, yeah, I was right. They need to be detained and deported. The last thing we want is for the remigration platform of Restore Britain to be watered down just because of getting the ick or feeling the outside pressure by the likes of Emily Maitlis, who don't want to address the grooming gangs, for example, and so aren't the moral authority, disapproving of something you say. And so I would just encourage Rebecca Shepherd, if she's going to be the Restore Britain candidate, to have conversations with the team and understand the reasons why we shouldn't show compassion to these foreign predators who come over with the express intent of treating our country like a Pashtun brothel. Because they've been shown videos of our women and girls on nights out dressed immodestly by their barbaric country standards, and who think that they're easy meat and eager prey. We should be indifferent to their discomfort, actually, because they have nothing but vile, violent intent against the people that we care about. So please redirect your compassion to our people, as you said, the people that deserve it most. From that same event, Rupert was asked a question about banning halal and kosher imports as part of the non-stun slaughter ban. It's in the paper. This is just a matter, I think, that we disagree on because Alistair, who runs communications for Rupert, said that we don't want to spend too much political capital on that controversial issue. Actually, I think it's a wise way to spend political capital. One, because the entire Restore base want it. If the policy is designed to discourage practices that offend the British people's preferences and prejudices, then we shouldn't create a market for those practices to be conducted elsewhere and then imported into our country. We shouldn't provide a financial pipeline for something we find objectionable. And also, we shouldn't flood Britain full of cheap foreign meat that's slaughtered in unhygienic and, again, offensive to our sensibilities practices to undercut British farmers who produce the best produce in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So I think this is a discussion that we're going to have within the party. The good thing is, though, we can have those discussions in the party. Like, members of Restore Britain aren't muzzled, unlike other parties who think that their position is more precarious and are worried about saying the wrong thing because they're trying to serve too many masters at once. I disagree with Rupert on this particular principle. I don't think it's virtuous to respect other people's religious practices if we don't like them and they don't belong in Britain. And if they want to practice those things, they can go elsewhere. And if they want to make money doing those things, well, they can't do that in Britain, either by doing it in Britain or exporting it to Britain. And I think a large portion of the Restore Britain membership agrees, and so I think Rupert can probably be persuaded on that. But I also wouldn't worry about this point of disagreement, because the more people that are in the party and advocate for the policy, the more likely the policy is going to be enacted, because Restore Britain has, back when it was a movement, incorporated an element of direct democracy. That's the reason why halal and kosher slaughter bans were prioritised as a policy in the first place, because the members voted for it. So I'm sure some kind of conversation can be had on this, because I think the party know that the base won't be too happy if the push factor of prescribing practices that are alien to our traditions and that we disapprove of is watered down for fear of causing offence or, again, being called racist. While I was recording, an interview with Rupert Lowe went out in The Spectator from David Shipley, and David Shipley had contacted me to ask, would you put me in touch with the Restore guys to interview Rebecca Shepherd, and I forwarded his contact information, and it seems they tried to set that up, and then, despite agreeing to do it, Rebecca then pulled out, and Rupert agreed to do the interview instead. And this is what I'm saying. You can't have a candidate that isn't willing to do interviews because they're worried about saying the wrong thing when they're already standing in an election. Media training is necessary. A little bit of encouragement is necessary. Otherwise, the candidate looks comparatively weak to that put forward by Reform. When the polling started to come in, the knives started to come out. The Times published a poll in this article, The Myth of Makerfield, and they only polled 369 respondents in the Makerfield constituency. That is a tiny sample size. More people will watch this video in the first 20 minutes than responded to this poll. Nevertheless, the poll showed Andy Burnham has a 43-point lead, Reformer in second with 40 points, and Rebecca Shepherd of Restore Britain is at 7 points. So, this provided the narrative to Reform UK that voting for Restore Britain will split the vote and allow Andy Burnham to get in. And Reform UK, for the first time, on its public Twitter account, took a shot at Restore Britain. I think that's a fatal mistake, because now you have recognised Restore Britain as your real opposition. You have recognised that you're both squabbling over the crown that you feel entitled to, and they have now coined the term Vote Restore, Get Burnham, which means Vote Reform, Get Starmer, or Streeting, or Angela Rayner, and so you have now put ownership of whoever succeeds Starmer, or whether or not Starmer stays, on yourselves by trying to force Restore to own a Burnham victory. Which again is ironic, because at the local elections they were saying Vote Reform, Get Starmer out, and now they're saying Vote Restore, Get Burnham, which means getting Starmer out, which is what we wanted originally, which means Reform now looks inconsistent. And despite the well-documented Streisand effect, Restore kept quote retweeting reporting on the poll saying Vote Restore, Get Burnham. And people were thinking, well, why are they coming out so hard against Restore rather than Andy Burnham? And why are they running a purely negative campaign from here on out when they started with Rob Kenyon talking about his merits as a candidate, his connection to the local area? Well, it's because this poll isn't quite accurate. It's not reflecting what Restore and Reform's canvassers have heard on the doorstep. It's also not reflecting what Labour's canvassers have heard either. I was going to include a video from a Labour canvasser at the start of the canvassing, but it's since been deleted. But he said that Restore has a larger presence here than we thought. Dan Hodges is saying the same thing. People who don't have a motive to downplay the Restore support are being honest about the presence of Restore supporters in the constituency. And so Rupert Lowe decided to post the numbers that had made him so optimistic in that car interview with Montgomery Toms. Here are the canvassing returns from Makerfield that we've had back so far from door knocking today. 1,010 sample size, so already 3 times larger than the Times Survation polling quoted. 24.6% for Restore Britain, 31.2% definitely against, 24.2% undecided, 20% considering, excluding won't votes. More teams coming back, so the sample size will grow a lot in the next few hours. Largely agrees with what we found over the last week. Astounding response with the working class, more difficult with wealthy areas, to be honest. That's where Labour have their voters, of course, because people who are making money off the status quo are not interested in changing it. And I have to report that I had heard something about these numbers a few days before Rupert had posted it. One of my friends, who obviously is senior in the party, sent me a voice note saying, we can't quite believe the numbers that we're hearing from our canvassers from early days. Like, we've had to ask, are you sure about those? We've had to check them multiple times. They've been this optimistic, because if you think about this, 31.2 definitely against is divided between Labour and Reform. 24.2 is undecided, so that means it's divided between Labour, Reform, and Restore. 20% are considering, so that means it's probably divided between Reform and Restore. So that means Restore Britain would be the single largest decided voter bloc in the constituency. Now, that might mean because of left behind non-voters that don't like Reform and Labour's offering are not showing up on previous polls, they're low propensity voters, and so they're going to show up for Restore Britain for the first time and take the constituency by storm. Or it could be because of the enthusiasm gap. Because as we're seeing with the number of people that are giving up their time and money to go and canvass for Restore for free, people who have their hearts set on Restore have decided early on. And so that means for the next few weeks, this is an influence and pressure campaign to win over undecided, fair weather, low propensity voters. And so Reform and Restore are competing for the same share of voters that haven't been persuaded by either offering yet, but who fundamentally agree on the same policies. They just have to make a character judgment as to which candidate and which party are credible enough to deliver on those promises. And this is why Reform have had an allergic reaction to their internal and Survation polling. Because they realise that some of their base are bleeding away to Restore Britain, and whether or not Restore Britain can actually win the seat, that remains to be seen. It means that Restore Britain's very presence will deprive Reform of both this seat and the parliamentary majority that they thought they had locked up. And there are a lot of vested interests in seeing Reform shepherded like a Ming vase into Downing Street in 2029. There are a lot of financial interests riding on this. Crypto companies, businesses in the Middle East and the United States, Paul Marshall in particular, who has, pardon the pun, marshalled his media empire to push Reform and also try to create an accord between what's left of the Conservative Party and the Conservatives that have now been migrated over to Reform to make Reform more palatable to the Westminster establishment. And if Restore Britain rides on their rightward flank, which they've just left open, and snatches a sizable portion of Reform's support base, and then causes Reform to overreact and denounce their own supporters that are in a Venn diagram between Reform and Restore as racist, bigots, useful idiots, splitting the vote, responsible for a disastrous government, then people are going to start to sour on Reform and migrate over to Restore in greater numbers, and the entire Reform project comes undone. A lot of money and access and safe seats and peerages in the House of Lords have been riding on this. They have been certain until now, and this is an inflection point. Reform are worried that Restore will eclipse and surpass them, and that everyone who thought they were going to make a lot of money out of a Reform government are worried that their investment won't return what was almost guaranteed just a couple of months ago. And this is why the attacks have started. A call clearly went out for every senior figure in Reform and their media surrogates to start dogpiling on Restore Britain. Nigel Farage tweeted, "The Times have just released a new poll for the Makerfield by-election by Survation. Robert Kenyon is the only candidate who can stop Andy Burnham. This is a two-horse race. Nobody else comes close." But having attached the screenshot of the polling disproves Nigel Farage's assertion that Rupert Lowe is just one angry man with a Twitter account, that he doesn't have any support, even in Great Yarmouth. He won't be on 1% in his own constituency, because they just swept Great Yarmouth at the local elections with double the vote share of their nearest Reform rivals. And so it betrays that he knows Restore Britain are actually a threat when he tried to downplay and deny and discount them. And they're a threat precisely because Farage admitted to orchestrating Rupert Lowe's defenestration from the party, alongside Zia Yusuf calling the police on him for a fabricated death threat 3 months after the supposed incident. And he said he did it, and it was brutal, but it was necessary, because Rupert Lowe wanted to deport the perpetrators of the Pakistani grooming gangs and the family members who knew about it and covered it up. And for some reason, Nigel Farage thought accountability for child gang rapists was beyond the pale of reasonableness, decency, and morality, and it was at that point he knew he had to get rid of Rupert Lowe. And Reform still, to this day, don't understand how disastrous that was. So they're just going to keep doubling down on the attack because they feel entitled to victory. They've bought their own hype. They are in the territory of Hillary Clinton in 2016. All of these tweets code as, "Happy birthday, future Madam President. This is my turn." Dan Hodge is now reporting that multiple sources from different parties show canvass returns for Makerfield put Restore significantly above the 7% in the Times poll, and that's what's underpinning the current Reform meltdown. Nadine Dorries quote retweeted this post and said, "If you vote Conservative or Restore, you're effectively giving your vote to Andy Burnham and sending him to number 10 wrapped in a red ribbon. Vote in haste, repent at leisure, Reform UK." Accusations of splitting the vote. That sounds familiar. Where have I heard that from before? Perhaps it was Nadine Dorries in 2024 during the general election saying, "Vote Reform, get Labour." These people will say anything. This is why the vote-splitting accusation doesn't work, because Reform were originally accused of splitting the vote, and they're now the party at the top of the polls. People don't want the status quo. And if Reform represents the status quo because they've taken in so many Tories that the public voted against at the last general election and wanted to punish using Reform as a battering ram, even at the risk of getting Starmer, then you're not going to convince them to keep voting Reform this time by saying Restore is going to split the vote, because they're going to say, well, you said Reform was going to split the vote, and then Reform overtook the Tories, so could Restore split the vote and overtake Reform, and I can actually vote for getting what I want, instead of voting for the least worst option, instead of voting to just keep the other guy out this time? This is why the arguments aren't persuasive. They're not convincing people. This is why they're getting more desperate, because they actually know they're not very persuasive. They know it's slipping through their fingers. Jacob Rees-Mogg and his sister, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, who was formerly a Brexit Party MEP, have made the same arguments. Again, it all happened. Same day, same time. The right needs to unite to defeat the dangers of the left. We need a Conservative and Reform pact. And Jacob Rees-Mogg said, if you want Andy Burnham to be Prime Minister, vote Restore. Well, so much for the conspiracy theory that Rupert Lowe has a secret pact with the Tories. He never has. He's always rejected the Tory whip when they've offered it to him. He doesn't want to be a part of the Tories because he knows that the Tories just want to steal his credibility like Shang Tsung and try to reanimate the corpse of the Conservative Party that's betrayed us over and over again. Again, I participated in the grooming gang inquiry that Rupert Lowe privately funded. Rupert Lowe sat through those hearings, and he heard about how Labour and Conservative politicians failed these girls time and time again, and he thinks both of them don't deserve to be in power. And if you wanted more blatant evidence that there wasn't some kind of Conservative plan to use Restore as a Trojan horse against reform, it's the fact that the most vocal Conservative voices have positioned themselves as brokers for a Conservative Reform Pact to save the Conservative Party, and because they feel more comfortable with reform now that the Reform Party is full of former Conservatives. Gorton and Denton candidate and disgraced academic Matt Goodwin is also making the same argument. What do Andy Burnham and Rupert Lowe have in common? They're both in this for their own egos, not the country. They're both in this because they hate somebody else. Burnham hates Starmer, Lowe hates Farage, neither genuinely care about Britain. Vote reform. We can be certain ChatGPT didn't write this tweet because it would have done a better job. Weirdly enough, I don't think Matt Goodwin's the best person to say that someone else is in this for their ego. I mean, it has become a bit of a meme that he brings up subscription to his Substack every 5 minutes. He also ran his Gorton and Denton campaign disastrously, refused to shake Hannah Spencer's hand, whinged about family voting, and then blamed the online right for his own loss when folks like me, Harrison, and Charlie warned that he was going to lose his efforts to be an MP, which we supported back when he was still friendly with us, by the way, because he was pandering to Sikhs and Hong Kongers in a seat with fewer than 1,800 non-Muslim, non-white working class minorities, and he lost by 5,000 votes. So, sorry, Matt, I'm not going to take your advice on what is electorally prudent or what is and isn't humble, especially when you decided to do the interview rounds promoting your book, which had a suspicious number of hallucinated quotes in, and you gave this rehearsed routine about how Restore are too extreme for promising mass deportations, oh, by the way, Reform is also promising mass deportations, and all the young lads associated with Restore, including some of my friends, and undoubtedly you were thinking of me as well, even though I'm not employed by the party, have ruined their careers, they've rendered themselves irrelevant. And this is why people are put off by the rhetoric coming out of Reform. It seems spiteful, underhanded, disloyal, desperate. I don't want to engage in this mudslinging match, but I do have to point out the deficit of character of people if they punch first. Matt kept posting these polls saying, I think unless all patriotic voters unite behind reform in Makerfield, then Andy Burnham will win, call an early snap general election, and put Britain under a hard left government until 2031. If you don't want this to happen, vote reform. As Dan Hodges actually noticed, this is conspicuous framing. He's saying Reform have gone from demanding an early election to desperately trying to stop one because they think they'll lose. And they admit Andy Burnham really is so popular nationally, he'll be able to reverse Reform's surge and win for Labour. So it seems paranoid by Reform. They seem to think that their hold over a majority share of the electorate is so fair weather and fickle that if you change the Labour leadership, it will pass them by. And so at no point do Reform introspect and say, why aren't we on Boris Johnson-style numbers, on 50% approval ratings and projected to win 40% of the vote, as he did in the 2019 general election? Why haven't we got masses of people out to vote, like we did for the Brexit referendum, if we're basically the party of Brexit, the party of the revolt against the establishment, the party of reversing mass migration, all the things that are apparently what the people want, that Matt Goodwin has written about for the last 5 years at least? Why haven't they succeeded? And they never think this is something they've done to themselves. Instead, they think that they're entitled to this vote share. Well, they certainly act like they are. And that any incursion on their territory is somehow a betrayal of the collective right. It's somehow an ego project, a vanity trip. It's not that someone else is promising a more authentic and robust policy offering delivered by people who don't have a lot of baggage by being in the party that inflicted mass migration on us in the first place, or have denounced mass deportations, or said that we need to appease Islam or we'll lose by 2050, whatever that means. There's never any thought put into how they lost these voters on Reform's part. There's never any thought put into why Restore exists in the first place. If Rupert Lowe was still in Reform UK, this would not be a problem. But instead, the leadership of Reform decided to call the police on Rupert Lowe because he said he actually wanted to do something about deportations. And this allergic reaction by Reform's supporters and surrogates and leadership shows that this is more about keeping a set of politics on rails within the parameters that they are comfortable with and stopping the electorate from voting for what they might actually want for a change rather than the least worst option, the safe pick. This is an exercise in containment, containing you. using fear, using social disapproval, and using a schizophrenic strategy of saying, oh, we're going to promise all their policies anyway, so they're a wasted vote, but also they're far-right and racist, and they're going to split the vote, but nobody's heard of them. It doesn't make sense. It's all over the place, and so it's just not persuading people. And Dan Hodges is right when he says, this is a disaster. If you look at Nigel Farage's attack on Musk, Kruger's comments about his own Makerfield candidate, and Goodwin's tweet, it's pretty clear Reform are experiencing some sort of mini-nervous breakdown. Aussie patriot Will Kingston points out, how are these arguments any different from the argument that the Conservatives made against Reform in 2024? And Hodges said, that's the incredible thing. Restore are literally running the Reform playbook, page by page, and Reform are acting like they've never seen it before. It's because Reform believe that they are inevitable, and so took their own voters and the country for granted. And one person within Reform that knows this is Tim Montgomery, the founder of Conservative Home and Unheard, former Conservative advisor. He says, I don't often agree with Dan, but this is a warning that Reform's campaign should heed. Restore may be big in its Twitter backyard, but it is desperate for mainstream attention, and to use that attention to begin eating into Reform's vote. A couple of points on that, by the way. One, I'm old enough to remember Nigel Farage bragging about his TikTok following, and yet, conspicuously silent now that he's getting ratioed on the daily, and his numbers aren't as good as Rupert Lowe's on Facebook, X, or YouTube. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but this is just my opinion. Rupert has been offered interviews by the likes of The New Statesman, and some of his team think it's not a priority. And I actually think that Rupert does best when he's up against the enemy. Like his interview with Emily Maitlis that went viral, that spawned the I don't care meme. So yeah, he should be flooding the airways. He should be taking every fight he's offered. Anyway, Tim continues, if I was one of Labour's many Machiavellians, I'd ensure Restore always had enough money and enough mentions so that it begins to split Britain's populist vote. Such a split is this government's last best hope of clinging on to power. Come on, Rupert Lowe, you're better than that, aren't you? Sorry, again, this is about character judgment. This is saying that it doesn't matter whether or not Reform promise a policy because they're feeling the heat of Restore Britain. It matters whether or not you trust the people promising the policy to carry it out. And by the way, it's not a split vote when Reform are unwilling to forward policies that Restore have already committed to. For example, an immigration red list that blanket bans India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and the rest of the third world from ever coming into our country, declaring that millions of people must go home. And you can see in the reply to Tim's own post why this isn't a split of the vote. Why Reform is offering just more continuity Cameron and Blairism that got us into this mess in the first place. Because Tim wrote, one additional thought on the splintering problem that Reform may face is on its right flank. Because the BBC, etc. almost never credits Nigel Farage for policing the populist right more carefully than any other populist leader in Europe, and much more thoroughly than Jeremy Corbyn ever policed the British left or Zach Polanski vets the Greens. Nigel needs to find ways of dramatising his biggest personnel calls. Right. So, Nigel needs to make more noise about how he has been the gatekeeper against what he sees as the far right, or ethno-nationalists, or rival populist parties, for years. Nigel needs to make more noise about how he orchestrated ejecting Rupert Lowe despite him being very popular with Reform voters and now a sizable portion of the public. Nigel needs to make it more well known that he is an agent of containment according to media standards. And this is apparently the populist vote that Restore are splitting. What do they agree on exactly? Because Reform's actions demonstrate that they despise a significant portion of their own base, whereas Restore Britain isn't in the business of disavowing random law-abiding members of the public, and also won't be made to answer for anything that its spokespeople haven't explicitly said. Tim seems to think that there are nearly as many uncompromising purists on the left and right, and the types who see betrayal around every corner and prefer the comfort of opposition to the compromises required in government, and that they are well beyond Nigel's reach, but there are more mainstream voters, especially women, who will vote Reform if they see us fighting the good fight against the likes of Tommy Robinson, the increasingly troubled Elon Musk, and the many anti-Semites that are spreading poisonously across the American right and will surely surface more and more here. Right, so Tim Montgomery sees Reform's actual battle as being against people he believes are on his rightward flank. He's still the same damp conservative that he was under the Cameron years, and now he's just swapped his rosette for a lighter shade of blue. Millions love Reform's policies, Tim claims, but need reassurance about Reform's people, proving that Reform lived by Martin Luther King's desire that every person should be judged by the content of their character rather than the colour of their skin must be a top priority as candidate selections gather pace. Okay, first of all, judging Martin Luther King by the content of his character, he was a party to rape, an adulterer, denied the incarnation of Christ, plagiarised his doctoral thesis, and palled around with communists. So, I judge his character to be pretty deficient. I don't consider him a hero that our side should own, Tim. But this just doesn't really wash when people feel their backs are against the wall demographically. People, in sufficient numbers, behave in predictable patterns. This is why countries are the way they are. And if you import a large number of people from a given country, they act the same way as they did in their home country in ours. And so, stereotypes start to hold. For example, yes, I do judge people on the basis of their behaviour. I judge the vast majority of Pakistanis in Britain on the basis of their behaviour and find them to be reprehensible. So, the solutions to the problems we face will require, yes, punishment of individuals, but those individuals be so numerous that it will look indistinguishable from collective punishment. It won't be, but it will look like we are punishing whole communities for the ways that their communities have behaved as a community to us. We think individualistically, they don't, and if you don't understand that, you can't solve the problem. And being unwilling to understand that means you'll never solve the problem. And so you're just offering more of the same. More of the same tutting and social disapproval that caused these crimes to be swept under the rug for decades. Nobody wants this, nobody's buying it, and despite saying that Reform attacking Restore will backfire, you're still saying we should be tone policing the online right and podcasters. Yeah, sure, there lies the path to victory. If you want to play that game, go ahead. Layla Cunningham's already doing it. She's complaining that people are photoshopping her unconscious in Rupert's wheelbarrow. Sorry. She is complaining that people are putting her in Rupert's wheelbarrow. And oh, that's horrible. Oh no. Sorry, how can you say this with a straight face? Is this your first day on the internet? You want to run to be London Mayor, right? One of now the most dangerous cities in the West. You're worried about a few mean comments on Twitter. Also, hilariously, Sarah Pochin, during an interview today, accidentally said that this is a two-horse race between Restore and Labour before correcting herself to say Reform and saying she'll be sacked for that. Honestly, I was very sceptical about Pochin when she originally ran as an MP. I think she's actually one of the better ones, and fair enough to her for laughing this off. And then you've got Robert Jenrick, who's doing this Jekyll and Hyde routine by saying Restore aren't even a problem, and also we agree with all their policies anyway.
How worried are you
issues
about
that really affect
Restore?
people in the country? Not at all.
Well, you should be, shouldn't you? Because I hear that internally the Reform Party doesn't want the Restore Party to get above 3%, could kibosh your chances of majority. We now hear from one Find Out Now poll that they're on 7% in some areas.
Look, the choice in the by-election, as in the local elections that we've just had, is very clear. It is Reform or Labour. So if you share our values, maybe you've been a lifelong Conservative voter, maybe you're voting for other parties.
It's not Reform or Labour, though.
The only way to get rid of Labour is to rally behind Nigel and Reform. That is very clear.
So apparently Restore aren't a threat and they aren't worth thinking about. But when Trevor Phillips of Sky News confronts Robert Jenrick with what I can only describe as an advert for Restore Britain, Robert Jenrick concedes that he agrees with all of Restore Britain's policy. He mistakenly says that Restore Britain policy is already Reform policy, and then says that he wants to deliver them, but actually won't commit in explicit terms to deporting, say, all foreign nationals that are on benefits, which is what Restore Britain have already committed to. So Restore Britain are making the promise in concrete terms, whereas Robert Jenrick is obfuscating and using legalese to create wiggle room so that presumably if they don't deliver the policy, they aren't held to account on this. And why shouldn't people just vote for the genuine article? Why shouldn't people want steak rather than the beyond meat that Reform is offering them?
You say what you say about immigration, but really, are you going to be able to get it down to those numbers without some extra measures? I wonder if the problem for Reform is that you're going to need to go a bit further than you have suggested up until now. Maybe you need to go further as proposed by your former colleagues in Restore. Here's what they want. Let me show you what they're saying. They're saying that if a legally resident foreign national, and by the way, legally resident is quite important here, foreign national If they can't do any of these things, speak English, they live in social housing, out they go. Are you attracted to any of these policies?
Well, most of those are reform policy, have been reform policy long before this party ever existed.
Is it actually reform policy to deport someone who is legally resident but lives in social housing?
Well, what we're saying, in some cases, because what we're saying is that we're going to abolish ILR and make a much longer path to British citizenship. And so instead of having this baked-in guarantee to remain in our country...
Current government's going to do that.
It's not abolishing ILR. It's making a somewhat longer path to British citizenship. Under our policy, you'll have to keep applying. If you've got a job, if you meet the criteria, then you can stay in the country and you can work your way to being a British citizen. But let me just finish this.
Hang on, before you go, just to be clear,
then you will have to leave.
Are you saying to me that a foreign person who is legally resident but lives in social housing will be deported under a reform government just because of that? They live in social housing.
Well, not exclusively because of that.
Well, that's what...
But if
you just said that's what you agreed with.
If they fail to meet our criteria because they're not in work or they're not working in as many hours, not earning enough money, then they won't be able to renew their work visa because ILR won't exist and they'll be asked to leave.
Oh, so you don't agree with
that? That is fair.
You don't agree with all of Restore's
let me
policies?
finish on the point about social housing. Under a reform government, let me be very clear about this, social housing will be purely for British citizens. So you will never be able to access social housing unless you're a Brit.
But you're still going to give out British citizenship grants to new immigrants. I mean, anyone born overseas should never be eligible for any kind of benefit, social housing, in our country. You don't get to come to another country and then just take advantage of its taxpayers. And this is the problem Reform have. Not only are they offering a diet version of what Restore Britain is offering when you dig into the details. I mean, Reform, for example, are not going to ban immigration from India. They're not going to do it. And it's an additional problem, because as Dan Hodges again points out, when did Restore get their policy agenda highlighted in such a prominent way by a national broadcaster? They didn't. I mean, they did a side-by-side of Jenrick's face and Restore Britain's policy to directly compare Reform and Restore's policy offering. That was broadcast into the homes of thousands of people, if they're still watching Sky News for some weird reason. Sorry for the continuity error, but Zia Yusuf has just quote retweeted the clip of Robert Jenrick from Sky News saying, "Robert's answer is not reform policy. As the person responsible for our deportation plan, I want to ensure people know where we stand. If a foreign national lives in social housing at taxpayers' expense, they automatically fail our economic test and will be deported." Now, this, again, doesn't address the problem of British nationals who were once foreigners, born abroad, coming over, getting citizenship, and then living off the taxpayer. I mean, those people should have their citizenship stripped and be deported, and they should be ineligible for social housing. Nevertheless, Zia Yusuf openly counter-signalling Robert Jenrick under the auspices of clarification on the timeline, making it apparent that they're both competing to succeed Nigel Farage, and no love lost is between the two men, because Zia Yusuf once accused Robert Jenrick of letting all the Afghans in and said he should be in prison, and then Robert Jenrick and his team said that Zia Yusuf was an anti-Semite, when Yusuf liked a tweet that accused Jenrick of being a Zogbot. Meanwhile, Charlie Downs is in the comments posting the Mr. Bean meme of Reform copying Restore's homework, and the Restore Britain account is going, all going well then. Reform's attacks on Restore have backfired because you're ostensibly promising the same thing, but you're unwilling to commit to it in concrete terms because you're afraid of being called racist by the media, and because not only are your personnel recycled Tories responsible for the Boris wave, like Robert Jenrick, but also your surrogates, your outriders, your supporters, and I'm not saying all, but some seem insincere, vindictive, spiteful, vitriolic, willing to lie and just invent total fabrications about Rupert's health, saying that he has dementia, or, for example, seeming to use bot accounts. Now, this may well be that these are VPNs, and there has been a line in a group chat somewhere coordinated that everyone's just tweeting because it's easier. But if you look at these posts, these random sort of slop farming accounts, like Crime of Britain, British Shitholes, Great British Humour, Nostalgic Britain, Heroes of Britain, have all tweeted essentially the same three-line post. Restore Britain's numbers don't impress me. Reform UK is the one with momentum and the chance to beat Labour. Splitting the vote with Restore just helps the old party stay in power. Restore Britain's Makerfield data isn't convincing. Reform UK is the only one that can beat Labour and deliver change. Restore just splits the vote, and on and on and on. If you dig into these accounts, they're saying, oh, they're based in the United Kingdom, but you have the little information icon to say that their location is uncertain because they might be using a VPN, but they're connected via the Philippines App Store. or they're based in Ecuador. I've seen quite a few of those. Why are there so many either foreign accounts or accounts using VPNs that are posting derivative, repetitive content in favour of reform against Restore? When, I remember, conspicuously, Nigel Farage and Alex Phillips were accusing Restore Britain of being a purely online phenomenon boosted by bots. And then there are the dirty tricks that reflect badly on Robert Kenyon personally. Here's Jack Anderton. He runs Farage's TikTok account, and he is this astroturfed influencer that's been propped up by one of Reform's top donors. Jack Anderton somehow got hold of DMs between Orla Minihane, one of the leaders of the Pink Ladies, protested down in Epping against the Bell Hotel, was a member of Reform, until Restore Britain launched, and then she decided to join up with Rupert Lowe because of his credible record on women's safety and tackling the grooming gangs. Jack Anderson somehow got hold of the DMs between Orla Minihane and Robert Kenyo's account. Kenyon doesn't always control the account, by the way, and the same person who used to control his account back when he was putting out some really strong stuff when he was in the Conservative Party is now no longer a member of his team. But Jack Anderton somehow got hold of these DMs between Orla Minihane, member of the public, and sitting MP wants to be the next Chancellor of the UK, where Orla was saying when she was still a Reform member, before the launch of Restore Britain, that I'm interested in running to be an MP because women and children safeguarding is my passion. I want to help out with immigration policy and women and children's safety policy. She also praised Kenyo's inaugural speech as Treasury spokesperson for Reform. I personally wouldn't. I think keeping the OBR and Bank of England in place is an absolute disaster. Nevertheless, who leaked this? Which member of Kenyo's team leaked this? Did Kenyon himself know about this? Did he sign off on it? Who thought this was a good look? Only someone as so arrogant and lacking in self-reflection as Jack Anderton would think that this was sensible to do, because now all you've done is you've told all of your Reform members who might want to contact the leadership or their surrogates and say, hey, I'm interested in being an MP, can we explore this? All you've done is told them that their communications with the party are no longer confidential and can be leaked maliciously if you display insufficient loyalty, if it's advantageous to the party to try to turn you into a scapegoat. So all you've done is made your own supporters and members worried that you'll betray them. Whereas Orla was asking in good faith as a member of Reform, hey, how do I get involved? I'm a vocal spokesperson, I'm loyal to the cause, how do I help out? And it seems that her defection to Restore Britain is vindicated if that's how the party is willing to treat her and other members. Orla responded to this, by the way, saying, a sitting MP and Nigel's right-hand man has leaked private DMs from when I was a Reform candidate and the chair of a London branch, and she's responded to the screenshot being reposted by this account called Right Track GB. You might have seen this account trying to promulgate fake rumours recently. Right Track GB has changed its name, actually, a number of times. 2 username changes last on May 2026. They were originally The New Reformer. So they're originally a partisan Reform outlet. You can still follow their Facebook links and trace back to when they were tagged in other posts as The New Reformer, and it leads you to the Right Track page. So again, these are some dirty tricks going on. They're trying to pose as a ostensible, independent, new media account just reporting the facts, when instead they're a Reform partisan outlet that is amplifying any attacks on Restore by Reform. A lot of this is just underhanded and is rubbing people up the wrong way. And so if the arguments aren't persuasive, and you've resorted to character attacks, smears, leaking confidential communications, then you're coming off as just really vindictive and untrustworthy. And this is what I responded to Chris Rose. And the reason I started this video with the relative strength of Rob Kenyon's candidacy is because I'm not attacking Rob Kenyon. He seems like a decent guy, some imprudent public jokes aside. Chris said, the right should absolutely unite behind Rob Kenyon. Do we really want to punish a patriotic, down-to-earth guy who understands the impact of uncontrolled immigration better than most in Parliament? He represents what many in Restore like as well. The right needs to be smart. And this would be a persuasive argument. It would. If not for the fact that, yes, Rob does seem like a good guy, patriotic, a public servant, a husband and father, does something useful for a living. He's an actual plumber, unlike Hannah Spencer. But the problem isn't him. It's Reform. It's the leadership. It's the way that they have behaved. It's the way that people like Jack Anderton or Alex Phillips, Matt Goodwin, Lois Perry, the way that those people have behaved towards not just the Restore base, but even the Reform base, and people who are undecided yet, blaming them for a potential Andy Burnham prime ministership, saying, as Andrew Lawrence has, that they are useful idiots, the woke right, the real racists. As I pointed out, I might suggest that insulting Restore supporters will not persuade them to vote for Reform instead, and also the term idiot comes from stateless person, or person who prioritises their personal interests over the interests of the nation. So it would mean, someone who, for example, can't define what an Englishman is, or says that a Welshman is someone who's lived in Wales for 5 to 10 years, and refuses to consider the people themselves the locus in which national sovereignty resides. And Andrew responded saying, "The striking fragility of your Restore boys, however, when it comes to light criticism is very telling. Sorry, but the insults are only flowing in one direction. And if you are interested in bolstering Rob Kenyon's chances, I would tell pretty much every Restore supporter to stop doing this, because it's really off-putting. It looks bitchy and spiteful, and as far as the public-facing senior figures of the respective parties go, Charlie and Harrison and Lewis and Carl Benjamin, they're not reciprocating this. If anything, these people were all our friends about 5 minutes ago, until they decided to be really rude and turn on us. I mean, it's really disappointing. And as I said to Chris, this doesn't stand up. Reform's attack lines don't stand up. Rob's disadvantage by the inconsistent statements of Reform's leadership on deportations, Islam, the two-child benefit cap, the Iran war. And Rob is an outsider, but he's in a party of recycled Tories like Nadim Zahawi and Nadine Dorries. Get Starmer out of the local elections is now meant to be keep Starmer in by blocking Burnham, so the messaging is inconsistent. And talk of Restore splitting the vote is entitled. It's like Reform takes their victories and the public as given, for granted. It's based on the false premise that non-voters and Restore supporters would have voted for Reform if Restore Britain hadn't have stood a candidate. That's just not the case. And it becomes more the case the more you insult them. The more you tell them they're wrong for wanting to vote for what they believe in rather than the least worst option. And also accusations that Restore is just a Rupert Lowe vanity project aren't convincing. It's not just insulting by proxy the voters that are voting Restore that Reform wants to win over, but it's also not convincing because, as Farage already says, he thought Rupert Lowe was a challenge to his leadership, and Rupert Lowe offended his moral sensibilities because Rupert wanted to deport the Pakistani perpetrators of the grooming gangs, and the families that covered it up. So it's not Rupert flounced out and created Restore as some sort of one-man band. It's that he was pushed out with a false police report, allegations of bullying in his office, claims that he has dementia by Richard Tice, the most vindictive behaviour possible that's still being perpetuated by people, not Chris Rose, but people who support Reform now. It's just not persuasive. Essentially, the rhetoric and behaviour of Reform's leadership and some supporters are becoming cement shoes for Rob Kenyon. And they can't take these cement shoes off. As Burnside says, Reform now have to explain why Restore exists, and I'm afraid saying it's because of Rupert Lowe's ego doesn't really cut it. They can't explain that a party full of Tories that fabricated slurs to remove someone who threatened Rupert's ego is the only alternative while reinforcing that there is one. And as Restore's own account said, vote Reform, get Zahawi. That's the impression that Reform have made to the electorate of themselves. They celebrated every Tory defector with fireworks and fanfare and a handshake from Farage. And the public voted Reform in 2024 and propelled them to the top of the polls because they wanted to punish the Tories. Now they want to punish Labour, but they don't want to punish Labour with the Tories. And so Reform have made this rod for their own back. Restore didn't need to exist, the Tories didn't need to be in Reform, and you didn't need to, in your own words, split the vote. Realising that their parliamentary majority is on a knife edge, that all the people that were betting on Reform for safe seats and peerages in the Lords and government contracts may no longer have that within their grasp, that's prompted a full spectrum crash out. For the last couple of days, there's been blanket negative media coverage of Restore Britain. It's definitely coordinated. Like, the call went out somewhere. And, for example, Alex Phillips, and it's sad because I considered Alex a friend, I invited her to my wedding. She's still ranting and raving about Restore Britain being a vanity project, being the political arm of the manosphere, being evil and racist and far-right and anti-Semitic. And again, because it's coming from a person who, I'm sorry, is suspected of being Nigel Farage's mistress, as the papers have reported, who said that she still loves Nigel, who used to be part of UKIP, part of the Brexit Party, and quite clearly wants to be a Reform MP. Because it's coming from her, it just looks like partisan vitriol. It's not very credible.
It's constant messing about, parlour games instead of making policy and doing what's right for the country. And this venal, vainglorious, vile game playing that goes on and on and on every single time because there's a load of people running around feeling full of self-importance. Ha ha ha, I've got a cunning plan. Oh, look at all the WhatsApp messages. Oh, which faction are you in? Oh, I'm in this faction, but I'm more than that faction. All of this nonsense. Running around thinking they're in like a dramatisation of the West Wing while Rome burns.
Yeah.
And I'm fed up with it.
Yeah.
I'm fed up with a lot of them. I'm angry as anything this morning because all of these people who are doing it for their egos and their sense of self-importance and their 5 minutes of fame or their feeling powerful, ha, my little plot worked. All of those people who sit there getting a kick out of scheming, manipulating, gaslighting. Yeah, all of those people are the reason why this country is heading down a sinkhole at a rate of knots.
The reason this isn't persuasive is because all that rhetoric could be applied to reform. The scheming by Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson to eject Rupert Lowe from the party. The whisper campaign waged by Richard Tice, fabricating claims that he had dementia. The callousness of Nigel Farage, justifying the false police report as brutal but necessary because Rupert presented a challenge to his leadership. The bitchy comments of Talk TV's very own Isabel Oakeshott, fiancée of Richard Tice, in the days preceding Rupert Lowe being expelled from the party, taunting him, saying, "Oh, poor Rupert, you don't understand politics," as if she was knowing it was going to happen. I mean, I've heard from credible sources that there were members of Zia Youssef's staff giggling like schoolgirls as they were drafting that letter to expel Rupert Lowe. So, people know that this has happened in reform. So to project that Restore Britain are a bunch of scheming schoolgirls, or there are no faction wars within reform. I mean, Tice has his Tory defectors, you have people that have installed Robert Kenyon in there as heir apparent, that used to install Zia Youssef in there, but Zia Youssef is actually, it turns out, an anti-Zionist, and the evangelical Christians who have backed Zia previously, friends with Danny Kruger, friends of Robert Kenyon, are very pro-Israel, and so they're actually not so keen on Zia Youssef automatically succeeding Nigel Farage anymore, and they've relegated him to the cuck chair as more and more Tories piled into reform, and then you've got Matt Goodwin basically on his own. The idea there aren't any faction wars, underhanded whisper campaigns, leaks from Millbank Tower, from people who are discontented by the fact that all this personality politics is detracting from their ability to write policy, to make a solid pitch to the electorate, to put forward candidates that are credible rather than just handpicked by Farage's other mistresses. The idea that that's not going on, nobody buys it. People can see the contours of conflict from the outside in reform. That's why it's incoherent. And the price of entry to reform has been betrayal of your previous party, of your friends, and people are just sick of it. People don't want more people that are compromised or cowardly running politics anymore. And whether or not Rupert Lowe is in with a chance of actually winning Makerfield, people are putting their faith in him because it's a character judgment, because he seems like an honourable man who keeps his promises to his wife, to his children, to his staff in his business and on his farm, to his friends, to the members of his party, to the country. And so people trust him more than they do Farage, who seems like he's just in it for, I don't know, 5 million quid from Christopher Harborne. And as Dan Hodges said, it's crazy that Farage and co have made this fatal mistake, because they have now taken the position of the Conservative Party in 2024 with their attacks on Restore, and have made Restore and Rupert Lowe look like the plucky underdog going up against a media monolith. Because yesterday, everyone put out a hit piece on Rupert Lowe. Carol Malone for GB News. Now, Carol Malone, those who don't remember, was on TV for 2 years, calling for more lockdowns, and once the vaccine was available, for vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, calling everyone an anti-vaxxer, demanding they get the jab as a condition for lifting lockdown, and blaming everyone who had some questions about it for the reason why we were all under house arrest. She was very supportive of Boris Johnson's government. So if Carol Malone is counter-signalling you, that's an endorsement. But she wrote that Rupert Lowe will do to patriotism what the left did to liberalism if he doesn't stop. As people were pointing out, what? Make it the dominant philosophy for over a century. Again, sounds like an endorsement. Then, in the pages of the Mail, Leo McKinstry wrote, "Does Rupert Lowe really want to go down in history as the man who made Burnham PM?" Again, every single press outlet seems to be carrying water for reform. There was another piece that went out titled "Ego Trip" that could backfire on Britain, with his party opening the door to a Labour by-election win. Reform hit out, restore leaders' vanity. And there's a quote in here. A senior reform source said Mr. Lowe is someone who cares more about his ego and vanity than what's best for the country. Our internal figures show Restore is on a tiny single-figure percentage. The only thing they can succeed in doing by standing is gifting the seat to Labour and Andy Burnham. okay, if they're on 1%, like you said they were in Great Yarmouth when they doubled your vote share and won every seat. If they are on 1% and they're insignificant, then why are you worried about them splitting the vote? Because Burnham has a 3-point lead over you, according to the polls that you've been sharing in recent days, saying, vote Restore, get Burnham. According to the polls that you've been sharing and relying on to make that argument, they have at least 7% in the seat. According to your internal polls, they've got higher. This is Nigel Forrester, the editor of the Pimlico Journal, and is saying his current guess at the state of play from the rumours he's heard: Labour are on 43 to 47%, Reform are on 35 to 40, and Restore are on 10 to 12. So this is someone with their ear to the ground with people that work in Reform, and they're reporting much higher internal polling figures than just the 7% in that fairly small sample size Times poll. If they weren't on that higher percentage share, why would you be shitting bricks about them to the point of where you put out a call for all of your media surrogates to dogpile on them and try and sabotage their chances? To, as the strategy was in Great Yarmouth, as was leaked to me by someone in Millbank Tower, strangle the Restore baby in the crib because you were worried it would eat into your vote share and possibly replace you. And then there's a Telegraph that, even before they were taken over by this German liberal buyer, have been publishing hit pieces on Rupert, Lowe, left and right. They quote Farage in here saying that Mr. Burnham would be delighted if Restore Britain were to receive more votes after being endorsed by Elon Musk. He said, Elon Musk has decided he will try to split the right of British politics as best he can. This is supporting a party that's one man with a social media account. Quite what he's trying to achieve, I have no idea. Again, these attacks just don't land because we're already seeing the photos. They've got hundreds of members in local branches. They've got thousands of people willing to go down and canvass for them for free because they believe in the project. They've got more canvassers than Reform. And both their internal numbers and Reform's internal numbers put them on more than just 1% and make them out to be more of a threat than one man with a Twitter account. I mean, Rupert also has a whole team working for him on his social media and comms, so it's not just one man either. So all of these attacks don't land. Farage is flailing around here. He actually looks like the weaker figure in this dialectic, whether or not he stands a better chance to actually win Makerfield at the moment. And then there was this piece in enemy publication Spiked Online, formerly Living Marxism before they got sued for libel and had to change their name, by Brendan O'Neill. He looks like Hector Hammond from Green Lantern. He comes from Marxist tradition. He is a liberal. He believes Britain is a nation of values, but also he is an arch ethno-nationalist for Israel and spends a lot of time writing about Zionism. So, you know, he wants a double standard. I just want that standard to be consistent, you know, just full disclosure. Brendan O'Neill wrote this piece, Restore Britain is the enemy of populism. And the language in it, I mean, I had to check it wasn't written by Seth Rogen. It's like a script from a Judd Apatow movie or an episode of The Boys. He says, Rupert Lowe clearly hankers after a place in the history books. The leader of Restore Britain seems to fancy himself a modern-day crusader, a soldier of Christ in a Savile Row suit, who together with his army of sun-starved digital simps might hold back the swarms pouring over our broken borders. I reckon he's far more likely to end up a footnote in the history of populism. And what's more, his bit-part role in the chronicles of our times will be an entirely inglorious one. He looks set to be remembered as the man who put his own colossal vanity ahead of the working class thirst for change. Reports from Makerfield in the northwest of England suggest Restore is polling at 7%. Its candidate is local businesswoman Rebecca Shepherd. I'll admit, this is higher than I expected. Makerfield, of course, is the by-election Andy Burnham is standing in as part of his grand plan to clear Sir Keir Starmer out of Downing Street. Burnham's main competition is from Nigel Farage's Reform UK, whose candidate is local fella Rob Kenyon. According to the Survation data, Labour is polling at 43% and Reform at 40%. You don't need to be John Curtis to see what this means. The 7% being hoovered up by Restore's oddball door knockers is thwarting a potential Reform win. Yeah, keep insulting people. I'm sure that'll persuade them to come over and vote for you. It's a two-horse race up there between voters who believe Burnham can resuscitate the corpse of Labour and voters who've had a gutful of the entire Uniparty and want to put the wind up it by taking a punt on the populace of Reform. Restore, by shaving its support from Reform, is giving the listless, dull-eyed horse of technocracy its best shot of winning. This doesn't only mean Labour would win a by-election. The Makerfield contest was magicked up as a coronation for the King of the North, as Burnham's goggle-eyed fanboys in FW1 love to call the Manchester Mayor. Labour MP Josh Simmons stood aside so that Burnham could get a seat in the Commons and then the throne in Downing Street, and right now, the best thing he has going for him is not his own thin, stilted, distinctly sub-Obama I'm a normal bloke bollocks, it's Restore's nerds nicking votes from Reform and then gloating about it on X because everything's a fucking joke to them. This is so millennial core. This is so terrible. It really does code as the 50-year-old stoner screeching at the phantom of his dad. And it just doesn't wash that Restore are full of sun-starved simps and online nerds. Like, yeah, sure, I'm a bit of a geek. I'm surrounded by comic books, and me and my wife play video games. So, I also have a garden. I also go to church. I've also got 2 kids on the way. My friend, Charlie Downs, a dedicated Catholic, he does jiu-jitsu, he's married. Harrison Pitt, accomplished academic, excellent writer, is spoken for. Sorry, ladies. Lewis is a great journalist. He generates the headlines that other outlets like Spiked have to steal. He makes the news cycle. Carl Benjamin has a media empire, is a mentor to many young men, has a larger audience than Spike could ever hope to have, has 4 kids of his own. So, all of these men are of good character. I care more about what they think of me and what country they would like to have than Brendan O'Neill, who seems like a mouthpiece for a foreign lobby and only seems perturbed when the electoral vehicle that is close to that foreign lobby might miss power by a whisker. Restore is the enemy of populism. It's a cult of personality pretending to be a party. Lowe, who's MP for Great Yarmouth, famously flounced out of Reform UK and said it had become the cult of Nigel. We didn't flounce. He was kicked out, had the police called on him, had the police raid his home and confiscate his shotguns, was subjected to lawfare, and the party spread false rumours that he had dementia. So no, he didn't flounce out. It was political assassination. And it was really unbecoming of Reform to do so, and they lost a lot of supporters for it. That's rich from a man whose online army of tongue-lolling acolytes would make Kim Jong-un wince. Yeah, God forbid that we think he is a good guy. And God forbid that people have a bit of fun with memes about Rupert. Restore is an almost entirely digital phenomenon, having eschewed the hard work of building real networks in real communities in favour of forging a virtual refuge for the socially inept who yelp "deport" on a loop and jeers when Elon Musk retweets them. First of all, I mean, again, really vulgar. This is peak, like, millennial soy boy. I am obsessed with sex and heckin' swearing. But also that they have built real networks and real communities. They've got local branches established across the country. They've got hundreds of people attending them. They've got over 135,000 members. And they're selecting their candidates from the local branches, which is why they stood Rebecca Shepherd. So again, these accusations, insults, projections just don't map onto reality, and so they're not persuasive. And being more vitriolic, swearing more, shouting more, demanding that we're all terminally online incels and using the language of what I thought was the enemy, it's not going to persuade people. And of course we get to the woke right. The crank right is the mirror image of the woke left. It has replaced the left's ethno-narcissism with its own ethno-nationalism. It's just nationalism. Civic nationalism is just liberalism. It can't secure the values or the culture or the propositions that purports makes a nation, because those laws, customs, habits, culture come from a distinct people after whom the nation is named. And if those people don't possess their own territory, their own political system, their own culture, then there is no nation. It's just an economic zone, a favela, a refugee camp, and that's not very desirable. That's why people are abandoning this unsustainable pitch that you have. From a politics that says whites are scum, to a politics that says only whites can be Brits and everyone else can bugger off. Okay, that's not Restore policy. But yes, British people happen to be white. What's wrong with that? No normal person wants this cultural savagery that masquerades as virtue. The crank right even wallows in the same cesspit of Jew-wariness as the woke left. I think we found the friend-enemy issue that Brendan O'Neill cares most about. Restore social media feeds very often swarm with virginal bigots spouting anti-Jewish invective that the overeducated left has at least learned to disguise as criticism of Israel. When is Lowe going to distance himself from this filth? Or will he just rattle off his favourite slogan again, "I don't care"? Yes, he will. Because why should Rupert Lowe be made to answer for things that random people on the internet say? If you don't like what random people on the internet say, log off. Turn your notifications off. Don't look at the comments. Don't let it get to you. And if these people really are insignificant virgins trapped in their bedrooms, well, they shouldn't be bothering you, should they? Richard Tice shared this dreadful diatribe. And again, Dan Hodges scores another point saying, sorry to be a stuck record, but Reform genuinely don't get it. Every time they attack Restore get stronger. Stephen Pollard wrote a piece in the Times saying Rupert Lowe could be about to make Andy Burnham Prime Minister. I just have to say, by the way, a lot of hit pieces being published are from the Zionist faction of politics, are from Jewish people themselves. Now, that's not to say that all Jewish people hate Restore Britain, but I seem to think it's more about the unwillingness to have a Restore Friends of Israel or a Restore Jewish Alliance faction, like the Conservatives and Labour and Reform have, and about the fact that Rupert Lowe said he's going to ban kosher slaughter, which signals that Restore Britain are not within the comfortable paradigm of international liberal platitudes, and undying loyalty to Israel. Not that they're necessarily hostile to Israel, it's that why should we deprive ourselves of a standard of national sovereignty and identity that Israel enjoys and is apparently key to its success? And just understanding that we can actually represent our own people and make policies in their own interest, no matter what foreign countries or special interest lobbies may say, seems to have ignited this coordinated attack by Michael Mossbacher and Stephen Pollard, who used to be, by the way, the research director at the Fabian Society, so spare me the concern trolling, Khaled Hassan, and Melanie Phillips. Melanie Phillips wrote a piece in The Times saying restores extremism is a problem for Nigel Farage. And she says that Farage's insurgency was based on standing against mainstream politics on behalf of millions who felt the political establishment had betrayed them. True. His greatest calling card was his authenticity. True. This lost its shine when he started to adapt his policies over welfare, transgender, or the mass deportation of illegal immigrants, apparently in response to the way the political winds were blowing. Completely correct. It also hasn't helped that the party's top brass increasingly feature ex-Tories, which is why parts of Reform's target constituency are gravitating to Lowe. All correct so far, but then, whose eye-wateringly hard line seems to have snatched from Farage the mantle of authentic insurgency. Got a little story for you. So when I went on that Israel trip, and was subjected to a series of seminars and lectures by pro-Israel speakers, and asked some uncomfortable questions in the Q&A, Melanie Phillips was one of the speakers. And we spent sort of 20 minutes arguing that Melanie Phillips wants to deprive Britain of the same standard of national identity as she insists is necessary for the survival of Israel. Because I said, okay, you moved to Israel because you think Britain is unsafe for Jews. It's being made mainly unsafe by Muslims. I don't like Islam. Would you be opposed to the evacuation of Islam from Britain? Given that you wrote the book Londanistan, which is like on the shelf behind me, would you support that? She said no. And then she got into an argument saying, well, if you want basically ethno-nationalism in Britain, it's going to be a non-starter. And she was saying that we have to maintain this double standard, despite British people being a global minority as well, and are about to become a minority in their own country, which Jews would find intolerable in Israel. They would do everything to stop, and I would understand why. The problem Phillips and those who write like her have is they're demanding empathy only flows in one direction. They're saying, we deserve a nation state for our people that deserves your sympathy and protection, but if you do it, you're racist. And I'm sorry, I just see exploitation by hostile foreign actors if I commit to that double standard. The amount of atrocities that have already been committed are already intolerable. And if it works for you, then I want that too. And this entire piece is to pour scorn on Rupert Lowe for essentially asserting that same primary claim to Britain, its territory, its culture, and its political system, for British people that Jews have in Israel. And I'm sorry, I'm just not persuaded that you calling him mean names is a good enough reason to deprive myself and my children of that entitlement. Lowe, who has pledged to ban Muslim and Jewish ritual slaughter, again, we found the issue, the Burqa and Sharia courts has proposed not only the mass deportations of illegal immigrants, not only, in addition, deporting legal migrants who refuse to speak English, don't work, claim benefits, live in social housing, or actively hate us, but also dual nationals who have done nothing to stop the rape gangs. So a wife who knew her husband had been involved but said nothing can go back to Pakistan, apparently, even if she holds British citizenship. Lowe's personal attitude is no less objectionable. On the stump in Makerfield, he confirmed that he had once said he wanted to put illegal immigrants on a midge-infested island and let the midges do the rest. Thank you for the advert. Then she highlights something important. Restore seems to attract even more unattractive or dubious people. To run the Makerfield campaign, Lowe has recruited the disgraced former Conservative MP Scott Benton, who lost the whip in 2023 after suggesting to undercover reporters at the Times that he would be willing to break lobbying rules for money. Yes. Yes, apparently they have. What Melanie doesn't mention here is that Scott Benton seems to have a conspicuous number of Hebrew tattoos all over him, even though I don't think he's Jewish, is also gay married, has denounced the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, where my friends work, who have already endorsed Restore Britain for their stance on abortion and assisted dying, being against, and he also has lots of photos posing with drag queens. Allow me to make this very, very clear, and I don't care if this gets me in trouble. Scott Benton should be fired immediately. Immediately. There is no benefit that his presence can bring that doesn't outweigh the problem of having a corrupt Tory in the No More Corrupt Tories Please party. So whoever hired him made a grave mistake and should not be making those decisions in future. Are we clear? Excellent. Nevertheless, Scott Benton is one imprudently hired person versus the hundreds of thousands of patriots who now believe in Rupert Lowe, and the rest of the public-facing team members like Harrison, Charlie, and Lewis, who already say the things that we all want to hear, and are actually writing the policy, and are going to render the party impervious to appeasing community groups or foreign lobbies. And then she whinges about the viral interview with Frank Wright, who gave the eloquent 14-minute explanation of why he supports Restore Britain, to secure a future for his son among his people, to ensure that Britain is not the plaything of international interests that don't really care about the fate of our children. The impressively articulate right said Britain was facing a moral, financial and diplomatic crisis. Whoever you voted for, the same mad policies had been enacted to bankrupt the country. Britain had turned into a borderless bazaar, where the competent were excluded from employment for holding the wrong views, the Tories' worship of the free market had demolished traditional communities and values, and nowhere seemed like home. Excellent. Perfect diagnosis of the problem. And then she said, thus far, Wright spoke for millions. But then he launched into a diatribe blaming all foreign wars, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, on Israel and the global Jewish conspiracy. Okay, that's not all foreign wars, though. I mean, there have been other wars. Nobody's saying the war in Myanmar is caused by Israel, are they? He didn't. And also, yes, those wars do involve Israel, because those are with their enemies. Israel is fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon. They reportedly placed pressure on Britain and the US to involve themselves in Libya and Syria with strikes. Certainly, the Israelis were beating the war drums for Iraq. I mean, Netanyahu, he wasn't Prime Minister at the time, but he was in Congress testifying that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and the US had to go and topple the regime. And then Iran, I just listened to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who said that Israel were going to attack first, so the Americans felt they had to follow them into the war. We know from the New York Times write-up that in a meeting, the head of Mossad and Benjamin Netanyahu gave a much rosier picture to Donald Trump of how the Iran war would go if they were involving themselves in it. And the director of the CIA, Rubio, and Vance all reportedly said, Mr. President, we don't think this is a good idea. So, yes, this does involve the Israeli government. And I'm sorry, you can't expect people to not point that out when there's a paradox of if it's celebrated, it's a good thing. If people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Ted Cruz are encouraging the United States involvement in the Iran war to defend Israel as a good thing, but then if you criticize the military action, it's only anti-Semitic. Sorry, people just aren't willing to put up with this anymore. The straitjacket is too tight. They just want it off. The only point of disagreement I do have with Wright is when he said the reason we have mass migration crisis in Europe is because of the wars in the Middle East that the United States has wholeheartedly fought, which serves only the grand strategy of the Israelis. It's not the only reason, of course, because India and Pakistan are not involved in those conflicts, and instead our government insists on importing them by the hundreds of thousands every year to subject our wives and daughters to abuse. And nevertheless, he is correct that regional destabilization has led to migrant surges through North Africa, up through the Mediterranean, swamping Serbia, Hungary, the rest of Europe, and then they arrive in Calais and make their way over to Britain. So that is an accurate diagnosis of at least part of the problem. Do you not think this is a problem, Melanie? And if that's not the reason, can you provide a contrary reason and what we should do about it? Should we deport all these people? Or would that be an unpalatable form of ethno-nationalism that only Israel gets to enjoy? The credibility of this piece goes out the window when Melanie Phillips says, the fact that Restore attracts such people mirrors the way Trump's MAGA movement has given birth to the Groypers, the rabid conspiracy theorists and isolationists led by the podcaster Tucker Carlson didn't even do 5 minutes of research to find out that the Groypers are led by Nick Fuentes, who is in a feud with Tucker Carlson because he keeps accusing Carlson of being a Fed, and Carlson keeps calling Fuentes a practitioner of blood guilt, an anti-Semite, and probably gay. I don't expect you to be listening to these podcasts and keep a bead on all the goings-on the online right, but at the very least, if you're going to write about it, you should probably do your due diligence and maintain your credibility and not make obviously false claims that could be rectified with a cursory Google search. And when my friend Josh Firm informed her about this, Phillips doubled down and said, the Groypers has become a generic term for the subgroup of white nationalist isolationists and conspiracy theorists whose most prominent personality is Tucker Carlson. Well, that's not true. It's a specific term for Nick Fuentes' followers. This has been pointed out to you, and now you're just trying to save face, which means that you come across as dishonest. So, I don't understand why you'd want to sacrifice your credibility on this matter, but it clearly seems that Rupert Lowe has provoked a really large reaction from people who are concerned about things other than the British people having the exclusive and primary claim to their own territory, culture, and politics. As Rupert points out, the coordinated hit pieces in GB News, The Times, Hope Not Hate, The Telegraph, The Guardian, spiked, so irrelevant it didn't warrant a mention, shows how coordinated the effort to stamp out Restore Britain is. He says, we're going for a full house, the establishment despises Restore Britain. And if you didn't want this to be the narrative, then it was unwise for Reform to marshal all their forces and make it look like a series of vested moneyed interests are the only thing standing between Rupert Lowe and Downing Street. And then to finish it off, you get Jewish news using Andrew Gold's podcast with Steve Laws to try to call Restore Britain anti-Semitic. And it's conspicuous then that Lois Perry, who is the director of Reform Friends of Israel, which includes a member of the Israeli Labour Party. His name's Jason Perlman. He is the former advisor to President Isaac Herzog, the Labour Prime Minister of Israel. The group apparently flew Richard Tice out to Israel in September. Lois Perry, who is the director of a lobbying group on behalf of a foreign government that contains former members of said foreign government, is now quote retweeting old clips of Steve Laws and Andrew Gold arguing, saying, here's a top Restore Britain activist telling Andrew Gold to go home because he's Jewish. My moles in Restore tell me Kemi Badenoch is in daily contact with Rupert Lowe, and he's been promised a very senior role in a potential Tory government as a reward for thwarting reform. These lies do put people off, because that's bollocks. Total lie. Neither does Steve Laws have an official administrative role in Restore Britain. This is what people are annoyed by. Reform has resorted to just making shit up because they feel power slipping through their fingers. And it's not like Lois Perry is particularly reputable. I mean, she was the temporary leader of UKIP. She then went and decided to take photos of herself in her underwear and launch a kind of OnlyFans career and put up big billboards of herself in her lingerie all over London. Like, put it away, Nan, please. She's also Nigel Farage's side piece and swans around Millbank Tower trying to put her friends through as candidates. And now is making things up about a rival political party while acting as the director of a foreign lobbying organisation. The question to take away from this battle for Makerfield is this. Whether or not you think Rebecca Shepherd is a stronger candidate than Robert Kenyon, whether or not you think Restore Britain have a chance of winning Makerfield or even the 2029 general election, are these the people you want in government? Lois Perry, Matt Goodwin, Danny Kruger, Nigel Farage, Layla Cunningham, Zia Youssef, are these dishonest people? People that will just lie, smear their opponents using all of the names that the establishment called them for years, seemingly work on behalf of foreign and ethnic interest lobbying groups? Are these the kinds of people you want in government? Are these the kinds of people you want to vote for? Or are you just voting for them because you're worried about letting the other side in? At which point I have to ask, what difference is there in character, never mind policy, from them and the Uniparty? Some of the personnel are the same. The tactics are certainly the same. The attitude towards voters is certainly the same. And so I would just encourage people watching this, don't listen to the propaganda of simultaneously splitting the vote and X party having no chance of victory. Just vote for who you think has courage, conviction, and who you trust to get the job done.